Hey, welcome back to the How to Podcast series. It's Dave with you again. Hello, nice to be here with you, talking about something that I've heard a lot from new podcasters who have reached out and that I'm working with right now, that there's this fear, this overarching, underlying, all surrounding, all encompassing fear that many podcasters starting out are facing. And I want to talk to you about this fear. And if this is you, this podcast is for you. Do you want to know what the fear is? Well, here we go. So I've been working with a few new friends, fellow podcasters who are creating their shows, and I've been spending time on Zoom and chatting about their show and giving them some insight and some advice and helping them set up their podcast, helping them with their artwork, all of those great things. If I can help you with that, I would love to. That's fun for me, and I really enjoy that. But as we talk through this, I had one of these new podcasters that I'm working with, one of my clients, and they were talking about the fear of failure. They were quite open and honest and said that they were struggling with the potential that this might not work out, that they might not have the goods to be a podcaster, and they were nervous. They were afraid of failing as a podcaster. And that made me kind of do a little research and kind of go back into my notes and pull up some information about some famous failures that have happened in the past. Some things that probably we might not even realize were potentially a big failure, but people somehow managed to get themselves together and salvage something that they wanted. So I got a couple examples for you. Steven Spielberg, famous director, was rejected from film school 3 times. Couldn't even get in. Elvis Presley was fired from the Grand Ole Opry and told to go back to driving a truck. And he wasn't all shook up. Colonel Harlan Sanders of KFC fame. He actually lived in Canada, by the way, as well. He was rejected over 1,000 times before finding a franchise partner for KFC, Kentucky Fried Chicken. Walt Disney was fired from his job at a newspaper early in his career. They said that he lacked imagination. Michael Jordan, greatest basketball player of all time, was cut from his high school basketball team. Keith Urban was told that he does not have the skill or talent or the voice to be a singer. There are many, many examples of how somebody was told that they did not have the goods to be or do the thing that they're most famous for. So my point back to you at the beginning of the episode is this. If you are telling yourself that you can't do this, or someone has told you that they don't think you can do this, you are among some of the best in the world who have been told the exact same thing. The difference between failure and succeeding is what you do with the feedback. And I'm here to say that if you can share your story, your voice with the world, you can be successful in podcasting. And that's really what I want to encourage you today with, is I want to talk about the fact that I want to separate the fact that there's the fear of failure and then there's the fear of failing at your first attempt at something. There's a difference between the two. We're all going to fail. We're all going to make epic mistakes. I've done podcast episodes where I didn't record the episode in the early days, and that was fun. I've made mistakes. I've left mistakes in podcast episodes that I thought I fixed. I've done many things, and I will continue to do many things because I'm a human being, and so are you. We're not perfect. We're learning. We're growing. And again, I'm going back to some past episodes where when I find a podcast guru that mocks the failures or mocks the shortcomings of others, that makes me quite upset as a podcaster. I don't think they deserve our time and attention and accolades because they put people down. So when I think about failure and battling failure, it's a common challenge to a lot of us. And I kind of want to start off right at the beginning, just defining failure, in addition to what we've already said. So failure is subjective and has different interpretations for each person. So it's not a one-size-fits-all. Generally, it refers to not meeting a desired outcome or just falling short of your expectations. And in the context of podcasting, failure could mean not achieving the expected listener numbers or lacking engagement. We don't hear back from our listeners. Maybe we received some negative feedback going back to a past episode and how to deal with haters. Or discontinuing the podcast prematurely. We just give up. And sometimes that's what people define as failure. Some examples of failure. Low listener numbers. Significant promotion can be done. Captivating stories can be shared. But a podcast can still struggle to get listens. I know in some of my shows, I have amazing guests that come on and share their hearts. And I look at the numbers and I would love to see the numbers be higher to benefit my guest. But this thing just takes time. And that's the one thing that we have to understand at the beginning. Even though we would all love to see thousands and thousands of listens for every episode right out of the gate, the reality is, for the most part, and in general terms, most podcasters aren't going to see those kind of numbers when they begin. And when you see low listener counts, we start to get down on ourselves. We start to think that we're failing. We're not doing successfully a podcast that's reaching many people. But we understand that podcasting is measured different than almost every other media possible. Think about radio for a second. Radio says that we reach 3 million people in our area for the listening audience. Does that mean that 3 million people are listening to their radio station? No, that means that 3 million people live in the area of the show. Now, that's a big difference between 3 million people listening to the show and 3 million people living in the area of the show. It's like putting an ad on a bench at the bus stop. And they say, well, 10,000 cars go by here every day. Okay, well, did 10,000 cars come to a screeching halt and take a picture and write down the phone number from the ad on the bus bench? No. When's the last time you noticed a park bench or a bus bench and the advertisement on there? And do you remember what it said? Do you know the phone number right now? Tell me the phone number. You don't know the phone number because it was a passing glance. And they sell stats saying we have 3 million listeners in this area, which they don't all listen. We have 10,000 cars drove by this bus stop and they didn't stop. And they say that that's an accurate stat. And then when we get into podcasting, we actually know where the people are listening from, how many listens we've had, how long they've listened to the podcast. We have more rich data around our audience and our listening audience than any other media source. And we have the opportunity to talk directly to the listener. So when you're thinking, I have small numbers, Dave, I don't have 5, 10, 20, 100 people listening to my show. Have you talked to them? Have you talked to them directly? Have you reached out to them? They just followed you on Instagram today. Did you say thank you? Have you had a conversation with your listeners? That's how you get to know who your audience is. And that's how you fight the failure and feeling like you're failing with small audiences. You build them up and show them that you really care about them as a listener. And in turn, they will become your best spokesperson and tell everyone else that they should check out your show because you truly care. Don't think that low listener numbers means that you're a failure, because it doesn't mean that. It means your podcast is new, or maybe your podcast is so niched down to a very specific audience that you're not going to reach 10,000, 200,000 listeners, because that's not the audience. You might have a very small group of people who listen to your show because of the topic, and they're really engaged with you. That's not a bad thing. That's actually a good thing. That's a number that any kind of advertiser would be interested in, because they're highly engaged and motivated to react to something you put in front of your audience and say, everyone, I would love for you to check out my sponsor today. Here's a link to their item. I use it. I love it. And I think it's going to work for you because I know you as my listener. And to have a great response from a small audience is better than having zero response from a big audience. Do you understand that? That's very important. And that's something that you can use if you want down the road to make some money from your podcast. But it takes time to build an audience that you can then put your sponsor in front of. It's not going to happen on episode 1. For the majority, 99% of the people, it's not going to happen on episode 1. Some people look at a lack of engagement as a failure in their podcast. A podcast may receive a minimal audience interaction at the beginning, limited comments, hardly any reviews, quiet social media. I've set up some Facebook groups for a couple of my podcasts, and it's crickets in there because it's new. And the people who do come into the room, I'm so thankful, and everyone's kind of waiting for me to start the conversation. The beauty of creating a place for your audience to connect with each other is when it picks up enough steam where you don't even have to be in the room. But as a host, you provide the location and your audience gets together and talks to each other about your episodes and about the community. That's a beautiful place to work towards. And that's going to take time. A lack of engagement can also just simply be the fact that you as the host are not engaged. And again, I challenge you, go to Instagram, leave some voice messages for people who follow you, all your recent followers, comment on other people's stuff, have other people on your show, build the engagement from your side of the microphone. Another thing that people think is an example of failure would be just giving up too soon. Some podcasters start with great enthusiasm, but give up way too quickly if they don't see immediate results and success and numbers. This could lead to discontinuing the podcast prematurely, missing an opportunity for growth and development. There's many examples of what people think failure is. But I just go back to the original comment that failure is more about our fear of failing at our first attempt. And I got to tell you, there's going to be moments when you are going to fail as a podcaster. That's reality. You are going to make mistakes. You're going to learn from them, and your podcast is going to be better. The fear of failure stems from the fear of not succeeding with the initial podcast endeavor. It's natural to have doubts and concerns when starting something new in anything, especially when you have high expectations for yourself and when you're measuring yourself against others who have had success. It's important to remember that failure is often a part of the learning process and that the first attempt may not always be immediately successful. Failure is a great learning opportunity. Instead of being paralyzed by fear and the fear of failure, podcasters can reframe it as a valuable learning opportunity. Failure can provide insights into what works and what doesn't work, helping podcasters refine their content, improve on their skills, and understand their audience better. Many successful podcasters have experienced failures or setbacks along the journey. They have learned from their initial attempts and adjusted their strategies accordingly. So a couple things to end off with here. Overcoming the fear of failure at the first attempt. To combat the fear of failing at the first attempt, podcasters can take these following steps. Are you ready? 1, set realistic expectations and understand that success may take time. 2, focus on continuous learning and improvement rather than striving for perfection. 3, seek feedback from listeners and use it to constructively refine your podcast. And 4, surround yourself with a supportive community of fellow podcasters who can provide you guidance and encouragement. To sum it all up, failure in podcasting can be defined as not meeting desired outcomes, such as low listener numbers, lack of engagement, or just giving up. The fear of failure often revolves around the fear of not succeeding with the very first attempt. However, embracing failure as a learning opportunity, realizing that many successful podcasters experience setbacks, and focusing on growth and iteration can help overcome this fear and pave the way for a long-term podcast success. When you were learning how to ride your bike for the first time, you didn't get it on the first try. You probably had some scraped elbows and knees. You probably wrapped yourself around a pole and got some gravel in your hands as you fell off your bike. It wasn't perfect the first try. My youngest son, Sawyer, he couldn't even ride a bicycle. We had a little dirt bike. He jumped on that and took that on before he rode a bicycle. He couldn't do it. He just couldn't ride a bike. He couldn't get his balance, but he jumped on a motorcycle, no problem. So we don't always get it the first time. And you need to understand that. And if you have the expectation that you're sitting there looking at your computer, you're looking at your podcast, you're listening to it going, oh, but Dave, it's not perfect. It's not exactly the way I wanted it. It's not perfection in a bottle. Your podcast may never go out into the world. And I like this, and I've heard this many times from some super amazing podcasters who have shows about podcasting, but they mention that you don't have to be perfect to start your podcast, but you have to start to become perfect. You have to start. You have to begin. You have to start the process of getting it out there. And then getting some feedback, putting it out in front of everyone and saying, here's what I think is my best work. What do you think? And get feedback. If you have a podcast and you're developing it, you're trying to get it off the ground, you're starting your show, and you want some feedback on your podcast, you want someone to kind of listen to it, and who I'm not emotionally connected to your show, but I would love to help you, and you want me just to listen to the show and help you out in little ways or big ways, then reach out to me through howtopodcast.ca. We can either go through Zoom, we can go through email, whatever. Get me a link to your show, to your episode, and I will give you honest feedback to help you improve. The one I just did this week, I had a gentleman send me his show, and he started out really, really loud volume at the beginning because he recorded the intro separately from the recording. So his volume levels were really high right out of the gate. And then he had about a minute and a half of just music. Music was fine. It was just like a minute and a half of music on a 1 hour show. So, and then when he came in, his volume level of his microphone, because it was recorded at a different point in time than he did his intro, his volume level of the show itself was really considerably lower. So I found myself reaching and grabbing the volume and turning it up so I could hear it to the same level as the intro. So little things like leveling out all the sounds so that it's one consistent volume so that your listeners aren't adjusting their phone volume in their pocket, or shortening up some of the music. It's fine to have music, but do you need to have that much music? information like that. And he kind of came back and went, yeah, you know what? That's a good idea. And there was a couple things where he actually sneezed and he coughed during the recording, and he didn't take it out. He just left the sneeze in there. So that could be edited out and no one would even know you sneezed or coughed. So there's little things like that which would benefit you and benefit your audience. If you want some kind of feedback like that, I would love to help you with this. And again, it's completely judgment free. This is your show and you can do whatever you want. And I encourage you to do whatever you want with your show. But if you want some feedback, I would love to offer that for you. howtopodcast.ca. Go check it out over there. I would love to connect with you and help you with your podcast. You are not going to fail. Let me repeat that again. You are not going to fail at being a podcaster. You might fail at getting your podcast started. You might fail on your first episode. You might fail the first time you record an interview. There's many opportunities where you might fail. And you need to understand that. But don't be afraid of failure. And more importantly, don't think that you have to get it right the very first time. That's undue pressure for you as a podcaster. Go out there, create something, and get some feedback, and then share it with the world. Get better every episode, one at a time. And don't think that you have to have everything perfect on episode 1. Start, grow, and everything else will fall into place. So if you're listening to this today and you're battling failure right now, remember, even the most successful people in this world, people you look up to and respect, have also failed. And they've learned. And they've changed and grown in the process. Fail forward. Start your podcast. If I can help. howtopodcast.ca. Thanks for listening.